9 physical therapists had quit on her in 14 months. 2 of them cried in the parking lot. On a Thursday in March at 10 minutes to 5 in the morning, an 11th specialist report landed in Marit Halvorsen's inbox with a sentence that ends this kind of story in it: no functional recovery expected. Recommend transition to maintenance. And she read it in a hallway outside a therapy pool in Winona, Minnesota, and then she went in and got in the water alone, which she was not supposed to do, and 40 minutes later she could not get out. The only other person in that building was the man who cleaned it. He was 35, he had a daughter in 3rd grade, and $41 in his checking account, and he did not run to her. And he did not call anybody. What he did instead is the only reason there is a story at all. If somebody ever waited on you when they didn't have to, put their name in the comments. Every one of those names deserves to get said out loud. Levi Hartigan came on at 10 at night and went off at 6 in the morning, and the pool was his last job before he left. Bluffside Rehabilitation sat on the north side of Winona, with its back to the bluffs and its face to the river, and it had 91 beds, an outpatient wing, and 1 warm water therapy pool kept at 984 degrees, the only one of its kind between Rochester and La Crosse, which is a sentence that would matter a great deal later. Levi's job was the plant. Boilers, filters, the chemical room, the 2 ancient air handlers on the roof that he had learned to talk to. His employer was not the hospital. He worked for Torrance Facility Services out of a truck, and his badge was a different color from everybody else's, and there was a whole floor of people who had walked past him for 11 months without once landing their eyes on his face. He didn't mind it. Mostly there was a version of him that would have minded it very much. That version had owned a bakery. Hartigan's had been on 3rd Street for 41 years. His father's and his grandfather's before that, and Levi had gotten up at 1 in the morning for 11 years to run it. He knew flour the way some men know engines. He could put his hand on a bowl of dough and tell you what the kitchen was doing. Too cold, too fast, needs another hour, leave it alone. The bakery closed in the 2nd year of Annie's illness. That is the entire explanation, and Levi never gave a longer one, because a longer one would have required him to say out loud that a business dies when the man who runs it is sitting in a chair in an oncology waiting room 4 days a week, and that he had chosen the chair, and that he would choose it again, and that it had still felt like failing. Annie died 3 years ago in April. Winnie was 5. She was 8 now. He had learned one thing in 26 months of hospitals, and he had learned it badly and late, and he thought about it almost every day, and it was this: the entire job is waiting, and almost nobody can do it, and the people who love you most are usually the worst at it. They fill it. That's what they do. They can't sit in a room where nothing is happening, so they bring you news and plans and articles and a man in Arizona doing something with juice. They ask how you're feeling in a voice that has already decided what the answer should be. They tell you to stay positive, which is a thing people say to make the room easier for themselves. Levi had done all of it. In the first year, he had done every single one of those things to his wife. And in the last 3 weeks, he had done the other thing, which was worse, and which he had never told a living soul about, and which sat in his chest at 4 in the morning like a swallowed stone. He'd stopped believing. Not out loud. He never said a word. But there is a way a person changes in a room when they have quietly moved a date in their head, and Annie Hartigan had been married to him for 9 years, and she had noticed, and she had never once mentioned it. And she had died 3 weeks later, and he would never in his life know whether the noticing had cost her anything. That is why Levi Hartigan waited. People made it into a virtue afterward. It was not a virtue. It was a debt. He knew who she was the way everybody in that county knew who she was. Halvorsen Seed and Nursery had been in Winona since 1938. Anders Halvorsen, off a boat at 19, selling cabbage and onion seed out of a rented storefront, and then over 60 years, becoming the reason half the market gardens in 3 states existed. They had 400 acres in production, a seed house on Prairie Island Road with a green tin roof you could see from the highway, and a mail-order catalog that 90,000 people still waited for every January. They also had in a climate-controlled vault behind the seed house 4,111 accessions of open-pollinated seed, squash and beans and melons and corn and tomatoes, 3 generations of collection, a great deal of it varieties that existed nowhere else on earth in any quantity. Because a Halvorsen had driven to a farm in 1961 or 1978 or 1994 and asked an old woman what that was, and she had told him, and he had written it on a paper envelope in pencil. Marit Halvorsen had run the company since she was 29. 3rd generation. The catalog was hers, the grower network was hers. The decision in 2016 not to sell to the first 3 buyers who came sniffing had been hers alone and had cost her a fight with her own brother that people still talked about. 14 months ago she'd gotten a virus, a regular one, the kind everybody gets. 9 days later she woke up on the floor of her kitchen and could not move her legs. Transverse myelitis. Level T9. There was no accident and no negligence and no drunk driver and nobody to sue, and Levi would come to understand that this, of all things, was the part she could not get her hands around. That a thing that enormous could arrive with no story attached to it at all. 6 weeks in Rochester, 14 months of therapy, 9 therapists. He heard about the therapist the way you hear about anything in a building at 3 in the morning, which is from the other night people. She went through them like water. She was late, then she was early and furious about waiting. She corrected them. She looked up their credentials. She asked one woman in the pool what her success rate was with complete injuries, and when the woman gave an honest answer, Marit said thank you and never came back to her again. 2 of them cried in the parking lots. That part was true. Levi had seen one of them. The building's opinion was settled, and it was not kind. She was difficult. She was a rich woman who thought she could buy an outcome. She was, said a nurse in the break room one night, going to have to accept it eventually like everybody else. Levi Hartigan did not have an opinion, because Levi Hartigan cleaned the pool. What he had instead was 14 months of 5 o'clock mornings. She came at 5 because the pool opened at 7, and because at 5 the only people in that wing were a night therapist and a man with a mop. He learned things about her from 90 feet away that not one member of her family knew. He learned she never used the lift. There was a chairlift on the deck, a good one, and she had used it exactly twice in 14 months and had hated it both times. And after that she transferred herself off the deck edge into the water, which took her between 4 and 11 minutes depending on the day, and which nobody was allowed to watch. He learned she counted. He didn't know what at first. Her lips moved in the water. He learned that she stayed past her session every single time, and that when the therapist left, she would float on her back in the deep end with her ears under and her eyes open, sometimes for 20 minutes, looking straight up at a fluorescent light fixture with a dead bulb in it. And he learned, without ever once wondering about it, that there was a small brown paper envelope in the zip pocket of her swim bag. He saw it every morning. The bag sat open on the bench, and the zip pocket never closed all the way, and the corner of it stuck out. Brown craft paper, soft with handling, old, with something written on it in pencil. Levi assumed it was a receipt or a card or the kind of thing a person carries, because it's easier than deciding where to put it. He would not find out what it was for another 9 months. He replaced the bulb in his 4th month. She never mentioned it. But the next morning she floated there for 35 minutes instead of 20, and he had to run the vacuum late, and he did not care at all. The Thursday in March started ordinary and went sideways at 4:52. He was in the chemical room doing his log when he heard the outer door, which was early, and then heard nothing at all for a long time, which was wrong. He came around into the pool corridor with the clipboard still in his hand and stopped. She was in the hallway outside the doors, not moving, phone in her lap, screen up, face lit blue from underneath, and she was reading something, and Levi Hartigan had been the man in that exact hallway on the 9th of January 4 years ago and knew every single thing about that face. He put the clipboard down on the chair rail and went back to the chemical room and stayed there for 11 minutes. That was the first time he waited, and she never knew it happened. When he came out, she was gone and the pool doors were shut, and Tilly Bach, the aquatic therapist, was not on the schedule until Friday, which meant Marit Halvorsen was in the water alone, which was against 4 separate rules. Levi went in and started skimming the far end and did not say a word. She swam for 40 minutes. Hard for her. He watched the water and pretended not to. Then she came to the deck edge in the shallow corner where the lip was and got her forearms up onto it and started the transfer. And couldn't. She tried it 4 times. Her arms had nothing left in them. 40 minutes of hard swimming will do that to anybody's arms, and hers were carrying everything. And on the 4th try, her elbow went out from under her, and she came off the edge and went under and came back up coughing, and the sound in that tiled room was enormous. There was an emergency pull cord 9 feet from where Levi was standing. He didn't pull it. He set the skimmer down, slowly, so it didn't clatter, and he walked to the corner of the deck, and he crouched at a distance, not close, not looming, 11 or 12 feet, and he said, in an ordinary voice, the way you'd ask a man at a counter whether he wanted the bread sliced, "Do you want help, or do you want time?" Marit Halvorsen's head came around. He would think about that look for the rest of his life. It was not gratitude and it was not relief. It was the look of an animal that has been cornered so many times it no longer believes in doors. "What? Help or time?" Levi said. "I've got both. I'm not on the clock for anybody till 6. She stared at him. Water ran off her chin. "You're the maintenance man." "Yes, ma'am. There's a cord right there. I know where it is. It's your job to pull it." "Probably," Levi agreed. "It's also my job to be gone by 6, and I'm never gone by 6. Something happened in her face. It came and went in under a second. "Time," she said. So he went and sat down on the deck with his back against the tile wall, 11 feet away. And he put his hands on his knees, and he looked at the water instead of at her, and he waited. It took 19 minutes. He did not talk. He did not count out loud. He did not say "you've got this" or "almost there," or any of the 11,000 sentences people say to fill a silence they can't stand. Twice he heard her go under and come back, and he did not move, and both times were the hardest thing he had done in 3 years. And he did it anyway. At the 19th minute, she got her hip up over the lip, and then her legs. And she lay on the wet tile on her side, breathing like a runner, and Levi Hartigan looked at the ceiling. "There's a towel warmer that works," he said. "Nobody uses it because the switch is behind the cart. I'll go turn it on." He got up and went to turn it on. Behind him, from the floor, in a voice with no shape to it at all, Marit Halvorsen said, "Nobody has ever asked me that question." She was there at 4:40 the next morning, which was 20 minutes before she had ever been there in 14 months. Levi was on the far end with the vacuum hose. He said good morning. She did not answer. He went on with the vacuum. She got in the water at 4:51, 6 minutes, a good day, and swam. And Tilly Bach came at 5:30 and put her through a program. And at 6:10 Levi went home to get his daughter up for school. That was the whole of it. Nothing happened. That happened for 9 days. On the 10th day, she stopped him at the door. "What do you want?" Levi had his jacket over his arm. "Ma'am, don't do that. Don't do the ma'am thing at me." She was in the chair on the wet deck with a towel around her shoulders and her hair flat to her skull and her jaw set. 9 days. "You haven't asked me one question. Not one. A man doesn't sit on a floor for 19 minutes and then not want something, so let's have it now, because I'd rather have it now than in 6 weeks. "All right." "Are you a reporter?" "No." "Do you have a brother in the seed business, or a cousin with a nursery, or a friend who's looking for work?" "No, ma'am." "Do you want a job at my company?" "No, everybody wants a job at my company." "I've got a job at your hospital," Levi said. "It's not a good one, and it's not paid well, and I'm going to lose it eventually, because Torrance loses this contract every 4 years, and everybody starts over. But I'm not looking. My daughter's got a school she likes, and it's 11 minutes from here, and that's about the extent of my plan." Marit Halvorsen looked at him. Then why, she said. Why what? 19 minutes. Levi shifted the jacket. Because you said time, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got that's true. You asked for a thing, and it wasn't hard to give, and I gave it. He put his hand on the door. I'm not a good enough man to have a better reason than that, and I'd rather you knew it early. She was quiet. Somebody's going to write something about me, she said. Sooner or later. The difficult, crippled heiress and her 9 physical therapists. It's a good story. It practically writes itself. Levi thought about that. Ma'am, I don't know a thing about you except that you count in the water and you won't use the lift, he said. That's not a story. That's Tuesday. Then he left, and behind him in a tiled room Marit Halvorsen sat very still for a long time. She was, for 4 weeks after that, difficult in every way the building had promised. She corrected his chemistry. That was the first one. She came out of the water on a Wednesday and said the free chlorine was running high and it was drying her skin, and she wanted to see the log. He handed her the clipboard. She read it. It was not running high, it was at 2.1 and had been at 2.1 for 9 days, and the thing bothering her skin was a new soap. She handed it back and did not apologize. She told him his vacuum was too loud during Tilly's sessions, and could he do the deep end after 6? He said no, because the pool opened at 7 and there was a shift change at 6, and the vacuum took 50 minutes. She said she'd speak to somebody. He said that was fine. Nobody ever spoke to anybody. Twice she cut him off mid-sentence in front of Tilly back. Once, and this was the only one that got under the skin, she said, when he moved a chair out of her path without thinking, "Don't do that. I can go around a chair. I have been going around chairs for 14 months, and I will be going around them for the rest of my life, and I do not need a man clearing furniture for me like I'm a parade." Levi put the chair back exactly where it had been. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That was thoughtless." "It was. I won't again." And he didn't, not once, ever, and about 6 weeks later she noticed that he hadn't, and it landed harder than any apology would have. He understood most of it. Not all, but most. A woman who has been touched, moved, lifted, transferred, discussed in the third person while present, and decided about by 11 doctors, and a brother is going to be extremely particular about the 2 square feet she still controls, and every single person in her life had responded to that by taking more of it away in the name of helping. He'd watched Annie go through a smaller version of the same thing, and had been, personally, one of the worst offenders. So he did the only thing he could think of. He asked before he did anything once, and then never asked again about that thing. "Do you want the towel warmer on?" Yes, that was the last conversation they ever had about the towel warmer. It was on at 4:35 every morning for the next 3 years. Tilly Back was the 9th therapist, and she was still there. And Levi came to understand that this was not an accident. Ottilie Back was 54, built like a door, had been an aquatic therapist for 26 years, and did not care even a little bit whether Marit Halvorsen liked her. "You're 2 minutes late," she'd say. "I'm aware. Then be aware in the water instead of on the deck." She would not lie. That was her whole system. When Marit asked her, in the 2nd month, the same question that had made therapist number 6 cry, "What's your rate with complete injuries?" Tilly said, "In 26 years I have had 4 people with your presentation get functional standing, and I have had about 90 who didn't. And I don't know which one you are, and neither does anybody in Rochester. And if you ask me again, I'm going to give you the same number, so let's use the 40 minutes. Marit had gone quiet for a full lap. Then she'd said, okay, they'd been working together ever since, and they were not friends, and Tilly Back would eventually be the 2nd most important person in a courtroom. Levi saw it in the 2nd week of July on a Tuesday at 5:20 in the morning, and he thought nothing of it for 3 days. Tilly had her doing hip flexion work at the wall, the kind of thing where the therapist moves the leg and the patient's job is to try, which is a strange and brutal job to have when nothing moves. Marit had done that particular set several hundred times. Then Tilly went to get a float belt, and Marit was alone at the wall. And a woman doing laps in the therapy lane, 2 overturned at the end, and pushed off, and the weight came across. And Marit's left leg moved against it. Not with it, against it. A small drift, 4 inches, the wrong way, in the half-second before the water took it. Levi Hartigan stopped with the skimmer in his hands. He knew water. He had spent 11 months of nights on that pool, and he knew exactly what a wake did to a body in it. And what he had just seen was not what a wake did. He didn't say anything. That was, he would tell one person years later, the hardest silence of the whole thing, harder than the 19 minutes, because every cell in him wanted to walk over to that woman and say your leg moved. And he knew. With the certainty of a man who had once handed his wife a printout about a clinic in Arizona, exactly what that sentence does to a person who has been holding a thing shut for 14 months. It doesn't give them hope. It hands them a job. So instead, that night, Levi Hartigan took out his maintenance clipboard and drew a line down the right-hand margin of the log sheet and started a column. The log already had date, time, free chlorine, combined chlorine, pH, water temp, air temp, turnover, and initials. Nobody read it. Torrance filed it for 90 days and shredded it. In 11 months, not one person had ever asked him a single question about that clipboard. The new column had no header. He put an X in it when he saw something. And next to the X, he wrote 4 or 5 words in pencil in small block letters. L-leg drift against wake. 520. 94-2. That was the first one. There would be, by the following March, 316. He had a life outside that building, and it was mostly Winnie. She was 8. She had her mother's chin and a gap where a tooth had been since November and a fierce, methodical way of doing things that Levi found almost frightening. She kept a list of chores on the refrigerator that she had written herself, and she checked them off with a pen she guarded. They lived in the back half of a duplex on Wilson Street. Rent was $6.80. Torrance paid him $17 an hour with no overtime and a benefit plan that he described to his sister Robin as a coupon. Robin took Winnie from 6 to 8 in the morning and got her on the bus, and Levi slept from 8:30 to 2 and picked her up at 2:40, and they had the afternoon and the evening, and then Robin came over at 9:30 and slept on the couch while he worked. It was an arrangement built out of nothing by 2 people who did not have a third option, and it had held for 3 years, and it would keep holding right up until the week it didn't. The bakery ovens were in a storage unit on the east side. 2 of them. A 1961 Hobart and a deck oven his grandfather had bought used in 1974. $41 a month, which he had paid every month for 4 years, which was more than he could justify to anybody including himself. He had not baked bread since Annie died. Not once. Not at Christmas. Winnie had asked twice in 3 years, and he had said not this week both times, and she had stopped asking, which he knew and thought about at 4 in the morning along with everything else. He mopped 400 feet of hallway a night and kept a boiler alive and put an X in a column nobody read, and that was Levi Hartigan in the spring of that year. And if you had told him where it was going, he would have laughed at you politely and gone back to work. Marit Halvorsen was not, it turned out, remotely what the building thought she was. He figured it out in pieces, the way you figure out anything at 5 in the morning. He figured it out when she took a call on the deck at 5:50. She thought he was in the filter room. From a grower in Iowa whose greenhouse had gone down in a windstorm, and he heard her say, Ray, stop. How much of the 88 did you lose? And then, after a while, all right. All right. Then we'll get you 50 pounds of it out of the vault, and you'll grow it back out for us next year, and we'll call the invoice square. No, Ray. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm protecting my own seed, and if you tell anybody it was a favor, I'll deny it. He figured it out when he found her at 6:15 one morning in the lobby with a legal pad, writing catalog copy in longhand, because she wrote all of it herself, 90 pages a year, and had since she was 29. He figured it out when Bo Yeager came to pick her up one morning, the seed house foreman, 70 years old, 41 years with the company, a man built like a fence post, and Bo said, Morning, Marit. And she said, Bo. The Dutch corn. And Bo said, I know it. And she said, it's 14 months. And Bo said, I know it. Girl, it'll keep. Levi didn't know what they were talking about. He knew what it sounded like, though. It sounded like two people talking about something alive that was waiting on somebody. He found out what she counted in July, and it was not what he'd guessed. He'd guessed strokes, or seconds, or breaths. It was none of those. Tilly had gone to take a call, and Marit was hanging on the wall in the deep end, with her elbows hooked over the gutter, resting. And her lips were going, and Levi was close enough this time to hear the shape of it. Numbers, but not in order. Numbers with words after them. She caught him listening and stopped. Sorry, Levi said. Wasn't my business. 4,111, Marit said. Ma'am? That's what's in the vault. Accessions. She let herself down a little in the water. 1104 is a Hidatsa shell bean my grandfather got off a woman in North Dakota in 1961. 2219 is a stalk of Dutch flint corn that came in from a family in Fillmore County in 78 and has never been grown out anywhere else. 3640 is a melon nobody has planted since 2004 because the last germination test came back at 51% and Soren said it wasn't worth the greenhouse space. Levi leaned on the skimmer handle. You've got them memorized. I've got about 900 of them memorized. I go through them when the arms go. She said it flatly, like a woman describing a filing system. You need something to do in here that isn't your own body. Yes, ma'am. You do. She looked at him. That was not a complaint. I didn't take it for one. The 11th specialist wanted to see her in person, and she went back to Rochester in June, and Levi knew about that only because she skipped 2 mornings and came back on the 3rd, looking like a person who had been in a car accident. Dr. Perrin Vosberg was not a villain. That has to be said plainly, because it would have been convenient later if he had been. He was a physiatrist in Rochester with 22 years in and a reputation for telling people the truth on the first visit instead of the 4th, and what he had told Marit Halvorsen was that after 14 months, with no volitional motor return below the level, the statistical likelihood of functional standing was very low, and that continuing an intensive program at her current intensity carried real costs. Shoulder degeneration, skin, time. The rest of a life she was not living while she waited for one. He recommended transition to a maintenance program. Twice a week. Focus on the parts of her that worked. Everything he said was reasonable. Every number he gave her was correct. She came out of that office and sat in the parking ramp for 2 hours. He asked me what I'd do with it Tuesday, she told Levi, weeks later out of nowhere at 5:40 in the morning. If I stopped. He said, what would you do with a Tuesday afternoon, Marit? And I couldn't answer him. I sat there and I could not think of one single thing I would do. What'd you say? I said I'd run my company. That's an answer. It's a lie, she said. My brother runs my company. He has since the 9th of February of last year, and everybody in that building knows it, and I go in 3 days a week and write catalog copy like a woman being kept busy. She got in the water at 4:53 that morning and swam for 50 minutes, which was too long, and Tilly Bach told her so. Soren Halvorsen came to the pool once that summer in July, and Levi liked him. That is important. He liked him immediately and completely, and he thought about that a great deal later. Soren was 34, 3 years younger, with the same coloring and none of the stillness. He came in at 5:45 with 2 coffees and a folder, and sat on the deck bench in a good jacket, and talked to his sister about a distributor in Indiana for 11 minutes, and then he said, how's the shoulder? And she said, fine. And he said, Marit. And she said, it's fine, Soren. On his way out, he stopped where Levi was coiling a hose. You're here every morning. Most of them. Is she? He stopped. Started again. Does she talk to anybody? Levi straightened up. She talks to her therapist. That's not what I asked. No, sir. It isn't. Levi coiled the last of the hose. I'm the maintenance man. That's about the extent of what I've got for you. Soren Halvorsen looked at him for a second, and then he laughed. A real one. Tired and short. Yeah, he said. That's about the answer I deserved. He put a 20 on the bench for the coffee cart, which there wasn't one of, and left. Levi told Marit about the 20. She said that's Soren, and did not elaborate, and there was something in her voice that took him 3 more months to identify, and when he finally did identify it, it turned out to be grief. The night nurse thing happened in August, and it mattered more than it looked like at the time. A new one, 24, 6 weeks out of orientation, kind as anything, came down the corridor at 5:15 as Marit was coming out of the water on the ramp side, which was slower, and started toward her with both hands out saying, "Oh, here, let me." And Levi, from 12 feet away, said, "Hey, Aaron, can I get you for a second?" She stopped, turned, "What's up?" "The paper towel in the family restroom on this hall. It's the wrong dispenser, and it's been the wrong dispenser since March, and I keep putting in a ticket, and nothing happens. Would you put one in from the clinical side?" They actually read those. It took 90 seconds. By the time it was over, Marit was on the deck in her chair with her towel, and the young nurse went off down the hall feeling useful, and nobody had been helped, and nobody had been humiliated. Marit said, from the deck, "The dispenser is fine. It's the wrong one for that hall." Levi, it was the first time she had used his name. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you," she said. And then, immediately, because she was who she was, don't make a habit of it. "I don't want to be managed." "No, ma'am." That was a one-time thing on account of she was new. "All right. If you'd rather I let people come at you, I will." Marit looked at him for a long moment. "No," she said. "I wouldn't rather that." Torrance cut his hours in September. Not his job. Just 4 hours a week off the schedule across the whole crew, which the regional put in an email with the words routine optimization in it, and which took $68 a week out of a household running on nothing. Winnie needed a winter coat. She had needed one in October of the previous year too, and had gotten one from the church box, and had known exactly where it came from, and had worn it without one word of complaint, and Levi had decided sometime around February that she was not doing that twice. He picked up Saturdays doing turnaround cleaning for a property manager. It was 11 hours he did not have. He was, that fall, $41 away from anything at all times. And the storage unit with 2 ovens in it cost $41 a month, and he was aware of the arithmetic and paid it anyway, and could not have told anybody why. By October, there were 109 X's in the unnamed column. Not all of them were the same. He had gotten more careful about what he wrote. He had no training, and he knew it. And the last thing he wanted was to be a man who saw what he wanted to see. So he only marked it when it was against the water, drift against a wake, a knee that came up when the wake pushed down, twice, a toe. He never marked it when Tilly was moving the leg. He never marked it when Marit was trying, because trying meant she'd want to know. Once in September, he came within about 4 words of telling her. She'd had a bad morning, a skin check had gone badly, and there was a pressure area on her hip that meant no chair for 4 days, which for her meant no seed house, which for her meant a week of being carried around in her own head, and she said, on the deck, dry-eyed and matter-of-fact, "You know what the worst part is? I've stopped being able to remember what it felt like. Standing, I can remember doing it. I can't remember the feeling. It's like a word you used to know." Levi had the clipboard in his hand. 109 X's. He stood there and he thought about Arizona, and about a printout, and about a woman who had noticed him move a date in his head and had never said a word about it. "Ma'am," he said, "when a thing's proofing, you can look at it every 10 minutes and swear it's dead." Marit Halvorsen turned her head. "What?" "Nothing," Levi said. "Bread thing. I used to bake." The bad morning was the 11th of November, and Levi has never told anybody what he saw, including in a deposition, because nobody ever asked him the right question. She came in at 4:40 and got in the water, and she was wrong from the first minute. He could not have said how he knew. Something in the way she was holding her head. At 5:05 she came to the wall and said, "Levi." He was at the far end. He came. "I need you to get my bag." Her face was blotched red above the collarbones and dead white below. and there was sweat standing on her forehead in a room where nobody sweats, and she had one hand pressed flat over her right eye. "What's happening? Get the bag." He got the bag. She took out a blood pressure cuff, her own, from home, and put it on herself in the water with her hands shaking, and Levi read it for her because she could not see the display. He read a number out loud that he did not know how to interpret, and that made her close her eyes. "All right," she said. "All right. Get me out. Not the lift. The ramp side. Then I need to sit up as straight as you can get me, and I need everything tight loosened, and there's a bottle in the front pocket, 2 tablets, and if the top number isn't down in 15 minutes, you're going to call an ambulance whether I like it or not." "Yes, ma'am." "Say the number back." 15 minutes. It came down in 9. She sat on the deck in a towel afterward, with her head back against the tile and her eyes shut, and her breathing going ragged and then long, and Levi sat 11 feet away with his hands on his knees. And neither of them said anything for a quarter of an hour. Then she said, "That was autonomic dysreflexia. Do you know what that is?" "No, ma'am. It's a plumbing problem that can kill you." She said it in exactly the voice she used for germination rates. Something below the injury goes wrong, a kink, a pressure spot, anything, and I don't feel it, so my body panics in the only language it has left, which is blood pressure. It can go stroke high in 11 minutes. It's the thing that will most likely kill me, and it will do it over something absurd. Has it happened before? Twice. Both times I ended up in Rochester. Does anybody know? Marit Halvorsen opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling. "No," she said. "Ma'am, don't. Your brother, if Soren finds out I had a 3rd episode, in a pool, at 5 in the morning, alone with a maintenance man," she said, "then 11 doctors and my whole family sit down, and I do not get to make another decision about my own body for the rest of my life. Do you understand that? Not therapy, anything, where I live. Whether I can be by myself for 4 hours. Levi sat with that. And if it happens on a morning I'm not here, then it happens on a morning you're not here. That's not an answer. It is the only one I've got," Marit said, "and I would like you to notice that I just gave it to you honestly, instead of lying, which is a thing I have not done with a single other person in 14 months, and which I did because I have watched you for 8 months not tell anybody anything." He drove home that morning with his hands at 10 and 2 and did not turn the radio on. He thought about it for 4 days. He thought about Annie. He thought about a printout from a clinic in Arizona and about a woman who had noticed him move a date in his head. And on the 5th day, he did the only thing he could think of that was not telling and was not nothing. He moved the emergency pull cord. It had been 9 feet from the deck edge on the wall side, which is where the code said, and which was useless to a woman in the water in the shallow corner. He got a length of nylon line and a snap hook out of the shop, and rigged an extension down the tile so it hung within arm's reach of the ramp side, and he zip-tied it neat and painted the tie ends white so it looked like it had always been there. And he never mentioned it, and neither did she. It stayed there until the day the pool closed, and he figured it out for good on a Friday in the middle of November, when she came in at 4:40 and did not get in the water and sat on the deck with a folder in her lap for 20 minutes without opening it. Then she said, to nobody, in a completely level voice, "My brother filed a petition yesterday." The petition was 31 pages, and it had been prepared by a very good lawyer. Soren Halvorsen was asking the district court in Winona County to appoint him guardian of the person and conservator of the estate of Marit Anders Halvorsen, aged 37, on the grounds that she was unable to meet her own needs for medical care and safety, and was unable to manage her property without significant risk of loss. It was not a document that called her crazy. That is what people expect, and that is not how it is done. Every line in it was gentle, and every line in it was aimed. It said she had signed a limited durable power of attorney on the 9th of February of the previous year, which was true, and which she had signed while intubated in Rochester with her brother holding the pen against the clipboard for her, because somebody had to sign payroll. It said she had discontinued the medical program recommended by her treating physiatrist and had, on at least 11 documented occasions, entered a therapy pool alone in violation of facility policy, and that facility incident reports were attached as Exhibit C. It said she had twice been hospitalized for autonomic dysreflexia and had not disclosed either episode to her family, which was true, and which Levi had not known, and which sat in his chest for a week. And then, in the section on the estate, it said this, that in the preceding 14 months the respondent had, without board consultation, released 50 pounds of proprietary vault stock to a third-party grower in Iowa at no charge, had personally overridden the pricing committee 11 times in favor of long-standing customers, and had declined, without written analysis, a purchase offer of $9,400,000 from Thorn Agriscience for exclusive commercial rights to the Halvorsen germplasm collection. They had taken the 4 kindest things she had ever done and lined them up as symptoms. Levi read it at a kitchen table on Wilson Street at 2 p.m. in his socks, because she had handed it to him at the pool and said, "You're the only person I know who isn't in it." And he had said, "Ma'am, I don't have any business reading this," and she had said that's exactly why. The hearing was set for the 11th of January. 8 weeks. Thorn Agriscience had been at it for 2 years, quietly the way they do. They did not want the seed company. Levi understood that part fast, because he had read the whole petition twice, and there was almost nothing in it about the 400 acres or the catalog. They wanted the vault. 4,111 accessions, 3 generations of collection, a lot of it varieties with no plant patent, no utility patent, no protection of any kind, sitting in envelopes in a climate-controlled room in Minnesota because nobody had ever thought to lock a door that had never had a thief at it. Exclusive commercial rights. $9.4 million. They'd take 400 of them to market and put the other 3,700 in a freezer in Iowa, Marit said. Not out of malice, out of housekeeping. And in 11 years, the growers who kept those varieties alive for 140 years would be buying them back under a trademark, and the ones nobody trademarked would be gone. Because seed that isn't grown is a rumor. How long does it take to be gone, for most of what's in that room? Between 4 and 11 years in the freezer before germination falls off a cliff, she said. Seed isn't a thing you own, Levi, it's a thing you're carrying. You get it wet every few years, or you're carrying a jar of gravel. Soren was not doing it for money. Levi wanted that to be untrue, and it stayed stubbornly untrue for the whole 14 weeks. He said it out loud once, in the corridor outside the pool in November, to Levi, because there was nobody else there, and because men will say things to a maintenance man they will not say in a room with a lawyer in it. Do you know what our margin was last year? 1.9%. On 400 acres and 90,000 catalog customers and 41 employees. He was gray around the eyes. Do you know what it was in 2016 when she turned down the first offer? 11. The mail-order seed business is dying, and it has been dying for 20 years, and my sister is writing catalog copy in longhand like it's 1974. That's a business argument, Levi said. That's not a guardianship. No. Soren pushed his hands through his hair. No, it isn't. Then why? And Soren Halvorsen said, because I already watched one of them do this. Levi waited. Our dad had a stroke at 41, Soren said. I was 8. Marit was 11. He was in a chair for 4 years and he did therapy 5 days a week for the first 2 of them, and he wouldn't stop. And he wouldn't slow down. And my mother begged him, and he wouldn't. And he had a second one in the 4th year, and that was that. He looked at the floor. And the whole time, the whole 4 years, every single person around him lied to him. And when he died, the house was full of exercise equipment. He looked up. I'm not going to stand in another kitchen full of exercise equipment, he said. And she will not stop on her own. She would rather ruin her shoulders and her heart, and the company, and her whole one life, than say the sentence out loud. So somebody has to say it for her. And I'm the only one left. Levi Hartigan stood in a hallway and understood that this was not going to be a fight between a good person and a bad one, and that the worst of it was going to be that both of them were right about something. The 8 weeks were an ugly kind of quiet. Nothing happened publicly. That is what nobody tells you about those proceedings. There is no shouting, There are no process servers on a lawn. There is a woman getting up at 4:30 in the morning to swim and then going into a building where the man who is trying to take her legal existence away has the office across the hall. And both of them saying good morning, because there are 41 employees and 100 years of a family name, and neither of them is going to do it in front of Lorraine. Soren did not move into her office. Levi had assumed he'd assumed a lot of things in that first week that turned out to be wrong. Soren went on running operations exactly as he had been running them for 14 months and brought her the same 3 reports every Tuesday, and twice in those 8 weeks he stood in her doorway and started to say something and stopped and left. Dana Price, meanwhile, did her job. She took the deposition of a nurse, then a second nurse, then the health system's risk manager over the 11 incident reports. She deposed Marit for 6 hours on the 3rd of December and asked her, according to Marit's own account of it that Friday, 40 separate questions about the pool that were really one question, which was, if you knew the rule, why did you break it? And she deposed Bo Yeager, who was 70 years old and had been at Halvorsen Seed and Nursery for 41 years, and who answered every question in under 9 words and volunteered nothing, and who came out of that room and said to Marit in the hall, "She's good, that one. She's good and she's wrong, and them's the worst kind." Thorne Agriscience sent 2 people to inventory the vault on the 21st of November. They had a right to. The offer was live and the POA was live, and Soren had signed the access letter, and they were perfectly polite, and they were in there for 11 hours with a laptop and a scanner. Marit sat in the anteroom the entire 11 hours and did not go in and did not leave. Bo Yeager sat with her for the last 4. He'd have had them out on their ear, Bo said at some point, meaning Anders. He'd have had a heart attack. Well, that too. Levi's own 8 weeks were mostly arithmetic. Torrance had cut 4 hours a week in September and cut 2 more in November, and by the 1st of December he was at 32 hours, with no overtime, and a benefit plan he described to Robin as a rumor. He picked up a second Saturday. He was cleaning turnovers for a property manager for 11 hours on Saturdays and mopping 400 feet of hallway 5 nights a week and sleeping from 8:30 to 2, and he was not, by any honest measure, doing a good job at either. Winnie got the coat. He got it at a store, new, in November, 3 sizes of thinking about it. And she wore it to school and did not say anything about where it came from because she was 8, and it was just a coat, and that was the entire point of the whole thing. The Christmas Eve service was the only time in 8 weeks that Levi thought seriously about walking away from all of it. He sat in a pew with his daughter and his sister and looked at the back of a hymnal and did the honest version of the math, that a man with an 8-year-old and 32 hours a week has no business standing near a legal proceeding involving a $9 million seed collection and a family with a lawyer, that nothing he did was going to change the outcome of anything, that he was not, in any sense that a court would recognize, part of this. And then Winnie leaned over and said, "Is your friend by herself tonight?" Levi said, "Probably." "That's the worst one," said Winnie Hartigan, and went back to the hymnal. She told him about her father on the 9th of December at 5:50 in the morning, and she told it flat. She did not cry. She had her hands on the wheels of her chair the entire time, and she never once let go of them. She said Jonas Halvorsen had a stroke on the 4th of April when she was 11 years old, in the greenhouse, and that Bo Yeager had found him and had carried him to the truck himself because the ambulance was 19 minutes out. She said the left side came back part way and the right side did not, and that the family turned the front room into a therapy room, and that for 2 years her father did 5 days a week, and she went with him on Wednesdays and Saturdays because she was the oldest and because she wanted to. She said in the second year he started breeding apples. She said he had a bench in the greenhouse at chair height that Bo built for him, and he had a cross he'd made the spring before the stroke, and he'd sit out there for 4 hours at a stretch with a tray of seed, and everybody in the family thought it was therapy, and it was not therapy, it was work. It was the only work he had left, and nobody understood that, except him. She said an apple from seed takes 7 to 10 years to fruit, and almost never comes to anything, and he knew that, and he did it anyway, And she asked him once why, and he said, because somebody put in the ones we've got. Then she said the part she had never said to another human being in 26 years. She said that when she was 13, she stopped going on Wednesdays. Not with a decision. Not with a fight. She said she had a friend with a horse, and she started going there on Wednesdays and then on Saturdays too, and her mother let her, and nobody said anything about it, and by the time she was 14, she had stopped going at all. She said the reason was not the horse. She said the reason was that somewhere in the third year, she had looked at her father on the mat, with two people holding him up, and she had known, the way you know the answer to an arithmetic problem, that he was never going to walk, and that everybody in that room was pretending, and that she was 13 and she could not stand in the room and pretend. So she left. She said he died in the September after her 16th birthday, and that the last 4 years of his life she had been polite to him, and she had been in the house with him every day, and she had not once gone back into that front room. She said, and then 14 months ago I woke up on my kitchen floor. She said, 11 specialists have now told me the same thing I decided about my father when I was 13, and every one of them is probably right, and I am not able to explain to you what it is like to be handed the exact sentence you handed somebody else. Then she stopped. The filter cycled. Somewhere up the hall a cart went by. Levi Hartigan stood 11 feet away with a clipboard in his hand that had 281 X's on it and did not say one word about them, and did not say it wasn't your fault, and did not say you were a child. What he said was, "Ma'am, do you know why he did the apples? I told you why. He told me why. He told you a reason. That's different." Levi set the clipboard on the rail. A man who's got 7 to 10 years of nothing ahead of him doesn't plant a seed to get an apple. He plants it so there's a thing in the ground that's got a date on it further out than the one everybody around him is quietly counting down to. He shook his head slowly. That's not hope, ma'am. That's furniture. It's a thing you put in a room so the room has an end to it. Marit's hands went white on the wheels. He wasn't waiting to walk, Levi said. He was waiting on a tree. And you weren't the one who quit on him. You were 13 years old, and you were the only person in that house who could count. She put her head back and looked at the ceiling for a while. There's a packet, she said finally. Ma'am? In my grandfather's desk at the seed house. Brown paper. He gave it to me the spring before he died, and it's got his handwriting on it, and it says 2 words, and I have had it for 26 years, and I have never opened it, and I have never planted it. What's it say? Marit Halvorsen wiped her face with the flat of her hand, once roughly the way you'd wipe a counter. It says not yet, she said. Bluffside announced the pool on the 18th of December. It went out as a service line notice, 3 paragraphs, over the signature of a vice president Levi had never met. The therapy pool required capital repairs the health system had assessed at $340,000. The deck substrate, the surge tank, the 1998 boiler that Levi had been keeping alive with parts he ordered himself. Utilization did not support the investment. The aquatic therapy line would be discontinued effective the 31st of January. The nearest warm water therapy pool was in Rochester, 51 miles. There were 40-some outpatients on that schedule. A man with multiple sclerosis who had driven in from Houston County twice a week for 9 years. 2 kids. A woman 90 days out from a knee replacement who cried at the front desk. Marit Halvorsen read the notice on her phone on the deck at 4:44 in the morning and did not say anything at all. 24 days. 24 days. And a hearing on the 11th of January in the middle of them. Levi went home that morning and sat on the back step in the cold and did the only arithmetic he was any good at, which was time. And it came out the same 11 ways. Then Dana Price took depositions. Soren's lawyer was thorough, which was her job, and she had subpoenaed the facility incident reports for Exhibit C, and had followed them, as a thorough person does, back to the people who wrote them. She took Tilly Bach's deposition on the 22nd of December. That went badly for her. Tilly Bach had been doing this for 26 years and could not be moved off a sentence with a crowbar and when Price asked whether Miss Halvorsen's continued participation was medically advisable, Tilly said, "Advisable by whom?" And it went downhill from there. She took the night charge nurses on the 23rd, and the night charge nurse, who was not being malicious and who was answering a direct question under oath, said that the facility's overnight plant technician was frequently present during the 5 a.m. sessions and had, she believed, some sort of running record of them. Levi Hartigan was terminated by Torrance Facility Services on the 27th of December at 8:40 in the morning in the parking lot by a regional manager who had driven down from the cities and who was not unkind about it. Unauthorized documentation of patient information. Recording observations of a facility patient outside the scope of his role in a plant log over a period of approximately 8 months. He did not argue. There was nothing to argue. Every word of it was accurate. They took his badge and his keys and the clipboard, which was Torrance property, and which by then had 316 X's on it. He asked one thing: "Can I get a copy of the log? Not the original." "A copy. I'll pay for it." "Levi," the regional said, "that's the thing that got you fired." "I know it. Then why in the hell would you want it?" Levi stood in a parking lot in December with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Because somebody's going to need it in about 2 weeks," he said, "and it isn't me." The regional looked at him for a long moment. Then he got in his truck and drove away. And 11 days later, a manila envelope arrived at the duplex on Wilson Street with no return address and no note, and Levi Hartigan never found out for certain who sent it and never asked. Marit found out on the 28th, and she found out from Dana Price in a conference room from a photocopy. That was the part that could not be fixed afterward. Not the firing, not the log. The fact that a woman who had spent 14 months being talked about in the third person while present learned that the one person in her life who had not been managing her had been keeping a record of her body in a column since July, and learned it across a table from the lawyer who was trying to take her rights away. She called him at 4 in the afternoon. He picked up on the first ring. 316, she said. Levi closed his eyes. "Yes, ma'am. Since July. Since the 11th of July. You watched my leg move in July," Marit said, "and you have said good morning to me 400 times since then." "Yes, say something." "There isn't anything," Levi said. "You're right about all of it. Don't do that." Her voice cracked for the first time in 10 months. "Don't you agree with me?" "Everybody agrees with me and then does whatever they were going to do. Fight with me." "I'm not going to fight with you about this." "Why not?" "Because you'd win," he said. "And I'd have to make an argument. And the argument would be about why I get to decide what you can carry. And I've heard 11 people make that argument about you this month, and I'm not going to be the 12th. The line was quiet. "They're going to use it," Marit said. "Do you understand that? Price has it. She's going to put it in front of Kowal on the 11th, and she's going to say, she's already said it, that the respondent has been receiving unqualified medical encouragement from an unlicensed hospital contractor with no clinical training, and that this is the reason she has refused her physiatrist recommendation, and that it is evidence of exactly the impaired judgment they're alleging." "Yes, ma'am. I expect she will. You've made it worse. I know it." "Then why did you keep it?" And Levi Hartigan, standing in a kitchen in a duplex on Wilson Street with a daughter doing homework 9 feet away, said the truest thing he had, which was not enough. "Because you said you couldn't remember the feeling," he said. "And I thought, if it ever came back, and you asked how long, somebody ought to be able to tell you the date." Marit Halvorsen hung up. She did not come to the pool on the 29th. She did not come on the 30th, or the 31st, or any of the first 4 days of January. Tilly Bach swam alone at 5:30 and then stopped coming too. And Levi, who no longer had a badge, sat in his truck across the parking lot at 10 to 5 in the morning on the 2nd of January with the engine off, watching a door that did not open, because he could not think of one single other thing to do. His last check from Torrance was $1,104. Rent was $680. The storage unit was $41. Winnie came out to the truck in the driveway on the 3rd and got in the passenger side in her coat over her pajamas and shut the door. "Dad, hey, Bug, it's cold. Go in." "You're sitting in the truck again," Winnie Hartigan said. "You did it when Mom was sick, and Aunt Robin says you did it for a whole year after, and you're doing it again, and I'm 8 now, so I get to say something about it." Levi looked at his daughter. "Go ahead," he said. "You told me a thing when Mom was sick." Winnie had her hands inside her sleeves. "You said sometimes you can't fix it, so you just stay in the room. You said that like 900 times. I did. So why are you in the truck?" Levi Hartigan sat with both hands on the wheel of a parked vehicle in a driveway in January. "Because she asked me not to come," he said. "Did she say don't come?" "She hung up." "That's not the same," said Winnie, with the flat contempt of an 8-year-old for adult reasoning. "Hanging up is not the same as don't come. If she said don't come, you'd have to not come. She didn't say it, so you're just being scared and calling it being polite." "Winnie, also," she said, "you never bake anymore." "Bug, you said bread doesn't need you to do stuff to it, it needs somebody in the room." She was crying now and furious about it. "You said that in the kitchen when I was little and Mom was on the couch. And I remember it. And then Mom died and you got rid of the room and you put the ovens in a box and you pay for the box every month and you never go there." Levi could not speak. "I'm not sad about the bakery," Winnie said. "I don't even remember it that good. I'm sad you sit in the truck." She got out and went in and shut the storm door hard. He sat there for 11 more minutes. Then he drove to a storage unit on the east side and rolled the door up on 2 ovens and $41 a month of a man's whole unsaid life. And he stood there in the cold looking at them for a while, and then he went to the grocery store and bought flour. He baked at 11 o'clock at night in a duplex kitchen in a bread pan meant for meatloaf, because he did not own a single piece of his own equipment anymore, and the first loaf was bad, overproofed, no ear, the crumb gone slack. And Winnie ate 3 slices of it standing at the counter with butter and did not say one word about the quality. The second one on Sunday was right. He drove out to the seed house on Prairie Island Road on Monday morning with it in a paper bag, and he did not go in. He parked at the end of the gravel by the green tin roof, and he got out and leaned on the truck, and he waited. Bo Yeager came out at 7:40. "You Hartigan?" "Yes, sir. She know you're out here? I expect somebody told her about 11 minutes ago." Bo Yeager looked at the paper bag. "What's that?" "Bread," said Bo, and went back inside. Levi waited 2 hours and 10 minutes and 21 degrees, and he did not knock, and he did not text. And at 10 o'clock the side door opened, and Marit Halvorsen came out onto the ramp in a parka with the hood down. They looked at each other across 40 feet of gravel. "You're an idiot," she said. "It's 21 degrees. "Yes, ma'am. You've been out here since 7:30. Bo tell you?" "Bo told me at 7:41, and I have been sitting in my office for 2 hours and 9 minutes deciding what kind of person I am," Marit said. "Come inside. Bring whatever's in the bag." They ate bread at a desk that had belonged to Anders Halvorsen. "I read it," she said. "The log. Price gave me a copy to upset me, and it worked for about 4 days, and then I actually read it." Levi didn't say anything. 316 entries, Marit said, and not one of them says she moved. Not one. They all say what the water did. "Wake from lane 2, drift against, 4 inches, 520, 94.2. It reads like a man logging a boiler. It was a boiler log. It's the most careful document anyone has ever produced about my body," she said. "And I have a file in Rochester 11 inches thick." She turned a page. 23rd of October, she read. "No X. Bad skin day. Left towel warmer on all morning." She looked up. "Why is that in a chemical log, Levi?" "Because I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget to do it again." Marit Halvorsen put the page down and put her hand flat on it. "I'm sorry I hung up," she said. "You had cause." "I had cause and I still shouldn't have." She pushed the bread bag toward him. 8 days. Price is going to put your log in front of a judge and call you an unlicensed contractor, giving me false hope, and she is going to be extremely persuasive, and I need you to understand that there is a real chance I walk out of that courthouse on the 11th with a guardian. And if that happens, the vault is sold by April. Then let's do the vault first, Levi said. What? 8 days. Do the vault first, because the pool's got 24 and the vault's got 8. He wiped his hands. What does Thorne actually think they're buying? Exclusivity, solely commercial rights to 4,111 accessions. Do you have that to sell? Marit opened her mouth, closed it. Then she went very still. In the specific way she went still when she was going down a hallway of drawers in her own head, and Levi sat there and did not say one more word for 4 full minutes, which by that point in his life he could do without effort. Bo, she said finally, to the doorway, not loudly. Bo. Bo Yeager came in with his hat in his hand. The grower agreements, Marit said. Grandpa's. The grow-out contracts. What about 'em? Where are they? Third cabinet in the vault anteroom, where they've been since I was 30, Bo said. 1938 through 1994. Your dad kept 'em up till the stroke, then it went to a handshake. How many? Bo Yeager scratched the back of his neck. 11,000, give or take, he said. Anders never threw out a piece of paper in his life. Here is what was in that cabinet, and it took 4 people 2 days to establish it, and it changed everything. From 1938 until 1994, Anders Halvorsen had never once kept a variety to himself. That was the whole business model, and it was not idealism, it was survival. A seed house with 40 acres cannot grow out 4,000 varieties. So you send them out. You mail 2 ounces of a bean to a market gardener in Fillmore County, and he grows a 1/4 acre of it and sends you back 11 pounds and keeps the rest, and you pay him, and next year you do it again with somebody else. And on every single one of those agreements, 11,000 of them, a printed form Anders had made up at a shop in Winona in 1949, was a clause in the 4th paragraph that read, in language a 19-year-old immigrant had worked out with a country lawyer, the variety named herein is held in common. Neither party shall claim exclusive right in it. The grower may save, replant, and distribute freely, and is asked only to send back what he can spare. 2,911 of the vault's accessions had come in under that form. You cannot sell an exclusive right in something your grandfather gave away 11,000 times in writing. Thorne's counsel took 6 days to confirm it and 1 phone call to withdraw the offer, and Wendell Straub was gracious about it, in the way of a man who has decided to be gracious in order to leave a door open, and the door stayed shut. And then Marit Halvorsen did the thing that turned a legal defense into a company. We're going to start it again, she said. They were in the seed house at 9 at night on the 7th of January, 4 days out, with the cabinet drawers open and paper everywhere and Winnie Hartigan asleep under a coat on 2 chairs pushed together. Start what? The grow-out. All of it. Not 400 accessions, all 4,111, out to the network, over 5 years. On Grandpa's form with the 4th paragraph in it word for word. She had a legal pad. The January catalog goes to 90,000 people, and it hasn't mailed yet. We put a page in the front. We asked for growers. Bo Yeager said, that's a lot of envelopes. That is a tremendous number of envelopes. What do we call it? Said Lorraine from the packing room, who had come in at 9 at night because somebody had called her and she had come. Bo Yeager, who had been at Halvorsen Seed and Nursery for 41 years, said Anders called it the long row. Why? 'Cause that's what he'd say when you asked him when a thing pay off. Bo turned his hat over. He'd say, that's the long row, that one. Meant it was worth doing. And you wouldn't see the end of it. Nobody argued. They mailed the catalog on the 9th of January with a page in the front of it, and by the end of that year the long row had 4,400 growers in 38 states, and 11 of the accessions that had been sitting at 50, 1% germination, in a freezer since 2004 were back in dirt in somebody's garden. Winnie packed envelopes for 4 days. She was 8. She had a system, obviously. She had made a chart. And by the 2nd day she had 2 adults working under her, and by the 3rd day Bo Yeager was calling her boss and meaning about 40% of it. She and Marit did not become friends. That is too smooth a word for what happened, and Levi watched all of it from a folding table with a pencil in his hand. What happened was that Winnie Hartigan simply included her. "You're in charge of the ones with the long names," she'd say, and put a box on Marit's lap without asking whether that was all right, and go away. And on the 10th of January, at 4 in the afternoon, the day before the hearing, with the whole seed house in chaos, Winnie stopped in front of Marit's chair with a stack of envelopes and said, "Is my dad going to be at your court thing?" "He is." "Good, he's the best waiter." "The best what?" "Waiter," Winnie said. "Like waiting." "He's the best at it. He's really bad at other stuff." She counted her envelopes. "He can't do my hair and he forgets Tuesdays. But if you have to wait for a thing, he's the person you should get." Marit said, carefully, "Winnie, is that something you like about him?" Winnie Hartigan looked up with total bafflement. "It's the only thing that helps," she said, and went back to work. The tank went in on the 6th. Marit had not been in water since the 28th of December, 12 days by then, and Levi had watched what 12 days did to her, which was not dramatic and was worse for it. Her shoulders locked up. She slept badly. On the 5th, she snapped at Bo Yeager over nothing and apologized 11 minutes later, which she never did. Water was not therapy for her. Levi had understood that for a long time. Water was the only 40 minutes in her day when the entire weight of the situation was off her, and she had been carrying it around dry for nearly 2 weeks, with a hearing coming. He asked Bo about the greenhouse. The old propagation house behind the seed office was 90 feet of glass built in 1957, half of it shut down since the 90s, with a hot water heating loop running under the benches off the seed house boiler. "Can you hold 94 in there? In January?" Bo Yeager considered it. "Cover the north half in poly and run the loop wide open. You could hold 88, maybe 90, not 94. Then we heat the water and not the room." They bought a 10-foot galvanized stock tank at the farm store on Highway 61 for $411. Levi had $89. Bo Yeager paid for it out of his own pocket and told Marit it came out of greenhouse supplies, and Marit knew inside a day and let him have it. Levi ran a heat exchanger off the greenhouse loop with a coil of PEX and a circulator pump he pulled out of a scrapped radiant floor kit, and he plumbed it through a strainer and a thermostat he'd bought used, and he lined the tank, and he built a transfer platform at deck height out of 2x10s with a rubber stair tread on it. And he did all of it in 51 hours over 3 days, with Bo handing him tools and Winnie holding a flashlight past her bedtime. It was not a therapy pool. It was a stock tank in a greenhouse. It was 5 feet across and 4 feet deep, and you could not swim in it, and the water smelled faintly of galvanizing for the first week. But it held 94.1 degrees, and it held it steady, and on the morning of the 7th of January, Marit Halvorsen transferred herself off a homemade platform into warm water in her grandfather's greenhouse at 5 in the morning with the frost on the glass over her head and 40 acres of frozen field going out past it in the dark. She stayed in for an hour and 10 minutes. Tilly Back drove out on the 8th, off the clock, on her own time, and stood in the doorway of that greenhouse with her coat on and looked at the tank for a long moment. "Who built this?" "He did," said Marit. Tilly Back walked the whole thing. She looked at the platform, and the tread and the thermostat and the grab bar Levi had lagged into a post at exactly the height she would have specified if anyone had asked her. "Huh," she said, which was the highest compliment available in her vocabulary, and she got her bag out of the car and got to work. Soren Halvorsen came out to the seed house on the 9th of January at 9 at night, 2 days before the hearing, which his lawyer would have told him not to do if he had asked her, which he did not. Levi was in the greenhouse checking the thermostat. Soren found him there. They stood on opposite sides of a stock tank in a 1957 glass house with the frost creeping up the panes, and neither of them was in a hurry. "You built this." Bo paid for the tank. Bo told me he paid for the tank. He also told me you were out here 51 hours in 3 days on no sleep, and Bo Yeager has never volunteered a piece of information to me in my entire life, so I take it he wanted me to have that one. Levi wiped his hands on a rag and didn't answer. I'm going to lose on Friday, Soren said. Maybe. No, I'm going to lose. Grace Tomtrack has the 49 form and Thorne's already gone, and the estate half is dead, and once the estate half is dead, the personal half looks like a brother trying to take a company. He put his hands in his pockets. Which is what everyone will say it was. Was it? No. Then say the other thing on Friday. Soren laughed, short and bitter. Which other thing? The one you said to me in the hallway in November, Levi said. About the exercise equipment. Soren Halvorsen looked at the water for a while. You know what she was like before? He said. You've only ever known her like this. She was worse. She was funnier. And she was worse. She once drove to Nebraska and back in a day to look at a corn crib. He shook his head. And I keep telling everybody I'm doing this because she won't stop. And it's true. And it isn't the whole thing. What's the whole thing? The whole thing is that I sat in the ICU in Rochester for 6 weeks and held a pen against a clipboard so my sister could sign her name, Soren said. And I have been terrified every single day since. And being terrified for 14 months makes you stupid. And I turned mine into a 31-page document because I'm good at documents. He wiped his face with the flat of his hand. I keep waiting for it to stop being an emergency, he said. Levi put the rag down on the bench. It's not going to, he said. That's the part nobody tells you. There isn't a day it turns back into a regular Tuesday. You just get to a point where you can be scared and be in the room at the same time, and that takes about 4 years, and there's no way to do it faster. Soren looked up. 4 years. Give or take. Is that how long it took you? That's how long it took me to stop sitting in the truck, Levi said. I'm still not good at it. Ask my daughter. She'll tell you. Soren Halvorsen stood in his grandfather's greenhouse for a moment. She talks about you like your furniture, he said. Do you know that? For 8 months. The maintenance man moved the cord. The maintenance man fixed the light. I thought she was being dismissive. He shook his head slowly. She was hiding you. They talked about it on the ramp on the night of the 10th, in the cold, with the seed house lit up behind them and Winnie asleep inside under a coat again. Tomorrow, Marit said. Yeah, if it goes badly, I want you to take Winnie home and not stay for the rest of it. No, ma'am. Levi, I'll take her out of the room, he said. I won't take her home. Marit pulled the blanket up over her knees. I need to say a thing, and I'm going to say it badly. All right. I have had, she said, 104 people help me in 14 months. Nurses, aides, my brother. 2 men who lifted me into a van in Rochester when I was too tired to transfer and were extremely kind about it. I am grateful to every one of them, and I could not tell you a single one of their last names. She looked out at the dark field. You're the only person since this started who has never once done a thing to me, she said. Not one. 14 months. You've done about 900 things for the room I was in. The towel warmer, the light bulb, the dispenser business, that ridiculous tank, and not one thing to me, and I did not know until about the 4th of January that there was a difference. And now that I know it, I can't stop seeing it, and it has cost me 2 nights of sleep. Levi stood with his hands in his jacket pockets. What do you want me to say to that? He said. I want you to tell me what you're waiting for. He was quiet a while. Ma'am, I've been waiting on you for 14 months, he said, and I never once got told what for. And I found out around October that I didn't need to be. That's the whole of it. There's not a plan under it. I'm not going to stand out here the night before a hearing and hand you one more thing to carry into that courtroom. And after the hearing? After the hearing, Levi said, you're going to be a woman with a company, or a woman with a guardian. And either way, I'm going to be a man with an 8-year-old and no job, and 2 ovens and a storage unit, and I'll still be out here at 5 in the morning turning that tank on. Nothing about tomorrow changes anything about me. That's the part I'd want you to have. Marit Halvorsen laughed once, wetly at the dark. You are the most infuriating human being I have ever met. Yes, ma'am. Come here. He came over. She reached up and took hold of the front of his jacket with one fist, not pulling, just holding, and put her forehead against his sternum, and stayed there for about 11 seconds, and Levi Hartigan put his hand very lightly on the back of her head and did not move otherwise. That was all. Nobody said anything else about it. It was 10 degrees out. Then she let go and reached into the side of her chair and took out the brown paper envelope. "I want you to hold this tomorrow," she said. Levi took it. It was soft as cloth, it weighed almost nothing, and there was the smallest dry shift inside it when it moved. Marit, not yet, in pencil, and a hand that had gone shaky on the second word. "I've had it 26 years, she said. "I've moved it 11 times. It was in my bag every morning at that pool, and I never told you what it was. Why not?" "Because the day I tell somebody is the day I have to decide about it." She put her hands back on her wheels. "Appleseed loses viability. Did you know that? Kept cold and dry, you might get 20 years. 26 is past the end of the road. There's a very good chance there is nothing alive in that envelope at all, and there hasn't been for a decade." Levi held it in both hands. "Then why keep it?" "Because as long as I don't plant it," Marit Halvorsen said, "it isn't dead yet." She looked up at him. "That's the whole thing, isn't it?" she said. "That's the entire 14 months, in a paper envelope. And I have been carrying it around in a swim bag." The hearing was held on the 11th of January in a second-floor courtroom in the Winona County Courthouse before Judge Ardith Kowal, and it took 4 hours and 11 minutes. There were 9 people in the gallery. Bo Yeager, in a suit he had bought in 1994. Lorraine from the packing room. 2 growers who had driven up from Iowa and were not asked to, and did not say a word the entire time. Robin Hartigan, with an 8-year-old who had been promised she could stay if she was quiet, and who was, terrifyingly quiet. And Levi Hartigan in the second row with a brown paper envelope in his inside jacket pocket. Dana Price went first, and she was very good. She was not cruel. That is the thing people always get wrong about those rooms. She was warm, and she was organized, and she built it the way you build a wall. One reasonable brick at a time, each one true. The February POA, the 2 undisclosed hospitalizations, 11 documented instances of entering a therapy pool alone in violation of policy, the discontinued physiatry program, the 11 pricing overrides, the 50 pounds of vault stock given away for free, and then the log. She put it on the screen, 316 entries in pencil in small block letters, and she walked Judge Kowal through what it was and who had written it, and that he was an overnight plant technician for a facilities contractor with no medical training whatsoever, and that he had been terminated for it, and that for 8 months he had been keeping a record of a woman's legs and a chemical log without her knowledge. "Your Honor," Price said, "our concern is not that Mr. Hartigan is a bad man. I don't believe he is. Our concern is that Miss Halvorsen has, against the unanimous advice of 11 physicians, chosen to organize her medical decisions around the observations of a maintenance worker, and that this, more than anything else in the record, shows the court where her judgment currently is." It was, Levi thought, sitting in the second row with his hat in his hands, an extremely fair description of the facts, and a completely wrong description of what had happened, and he had no idea in the world how anybody was supposed to explain the difference to a judge. Grace Tomjak called Dr. Perrin Vosberg. That was the move nobody expected, because Vosberg was their witness, he was the author of the sentence, he was the 11th specialist, and Price had him on her list for the afternoon. Tomjak called him first and asked him 4 questions. "Doctor, is your prognosis for Miss Halvorsen unchanged?" "It is. Statistically. Functional standing at 14 months post-onset with her presentation is very unlikely." "I have not revised that. Have you reviewed the pool log?" "I have. Last night." "What is it?" And Dr. Perrin Vosberg, who was not a villain, took his time. "It's a record of stimulus-specific movement," he said. 316 observations over 8 months. All of them describing motion occurring against a hydrodynamic force rather than with it, which is the distinction that matters. and which frankly I would not have expected a layperson to make. He turned a page. It is not a clinical instrument. It proves nothing. If a resident brought it to me, I would tell them it's uncontrolled observation by an untrained observer with an obvious emotional interest. Then it's worthless. I didn't say that. Tom Jack waited. It's the most consistent longitudinal data anyone has on this patient, Vosberg said, because I see her twice a year for 40 minutes, and this man saw her 400 times. He set the page down. I said in June that her program should be reduced to maintenance. Having read this, I would not say that today. I'd order a repeat study. That is not a prognosis, and I want the court to hear me clearly. It is not hope, and I am not offering any. It's a study. Doctor, does relying on that log show impaired judgment? Vosberg looked at Marit Halvorsen for a moment. No, he said. It shows she was paying attention to the one person in the building who was. The estate half took 40 minutes and it fell apart quietly. Tom Jack entered Anders Halvorsen's 1949 grower agreement. She entered 11,000 executed copies of it by certified index. She entered the fourth paragraph and read it aloud and let it sit. She entered Thornagri Science's written withdrawal of its offer, dated the 9th of January, which stated that the proposed exclusive rights could not be conveyed. She entered the January catalog, mailed, 90,000 copies, gone, unrecallable, with the long row page in the front of it. Your Honor, she said, the petition alleges that my client's refusal of $9.4 million was evidence of impaired judgment. As of Friday, that offer could not lawfully have been accepted by anyone. The impairment, if there was one, was in the offer. Marit testified last. She was on the stand for 51 minutes, and she did not perform for 1 second of it. Levi had wondered whether she would. She didn't. She agreed with almost everything. She agreed she'd hidden the 2 hospitalizations. She said it was indefensible and she had no defense. She agreed she'd been in the water alone 11 times, and said that she had done it because the alternative was not being in the water, and that she would probably do it again. And Judge Kowal wrote something down. Then Grace Tomczak asked her why she had not stopped therapy when 11 doctors told her to. And Marit Halvorsen told a courtroom in Winona County about her father. She told it exactly the way she'd told it on a wet pool deck at 5:50 in the morning. The stroke in the greenhouse. Bo carrying him to the truck. The front room. Wednesdays and Saturdays. The bench at chair height. The apples. And then she said, when I was 13 I stopped going. Not because I stopped loving him. Because I did the arithmetic and I got the right answer, and I couldn't be in the room and pretend, so I left. And I let a 14-year-old girl's honesty be the reason I never sat with my father again. He died 3 years later, and I was in the house the whole time, and I was never once in that room. She had her hands on the arms of the chair. My brother thinks I'm refusing to accept a fact, she said. I accepted the fact 14 months ago in Rochester. I accepted it in about 4 minutes. I've been good at accepting facts since I was 13. That has never been the problem. She looked at Soren for the first time all morning. The problem is that I have spent 26 years believing that a person who leaves a room because the arithmetic is bad is a coward. And then a man who mops a floor sat down 11 feet away from me on wet tile and did not leave the room for 19 minutes and did not lie to me once. And I found out there was a third option. And I am not going to give it up. She stopped. I don't need anybody to believe I'll stand, Your Honor, she said. I've never asked anyone to. I need them to not leave. Soren Halvorsen asked to be heard before the court ruled. He stood at the table with no notes and said, in a voice that came apart twice, that he had filed the petition, that no one had put him up to it, and that he had believed every word of it when he signed it. He said he had learned in the last 11 days that his sister had turned down $9,400,000 for a reason he had never once asked her to explain, and that the reason was in a filing cabinet 9 feet from his own office, and that he had been in that building his entire adult life and had never opened the drawer. He said he was not withdrawing the petition because he'd sworn to things in it that were true, and he was not going to unswear them for comfort. He said he was asking the court to deny it anyway. Then he sat down, and Judge Ardith Kowal took a recess of 20 minutes and came back and denied the petition on both counts. And the limited power of attorney was revoked on the record at 2:41 in the afternoon. Nobody cheered. That is not what happens in those rooms. Bo Yeager blew his nose like a foghorn, and the bailiff pretended not to hear it. The standing did not happen in that courtroom, and Levi was glad about it for the rest of his life. It happened on the 9th of March at 5:40 in the morning in a stock tank in a 1957 greenhouse with the frost going gray on the glass, with 3 people present. Tilly Bach had her doing wall work, the same set she had done several thousand times, the one where the therapist gives no assistance and the patient's job is to try. Marit was chest deep, hands on the rim, and the water was 94.1. Tilly said, again, and Marit Halvorsen's legs took her weight. Not for long. Not without her arms. She had a fist on the galvanized rim and Tilly Bach's palm flat against her sternum, and it was, by any clinical measure, supported standing in a buoyant medium, which is a sentence Dr. Vosberg would use 11 days later in a report, and which describes exactly nothing. She stood in the water in her grandfather's greenhouse for 22 seconds. Nobody said a word. Tilly Bach did not say "there you go," and Levi Hartigan, in the doorway with a wrench in his hand, did not say anything at all, because they had both been doing this long enough to know that the worst thing you can do to a moment like that is put words on it while it's happening. Then her arms went, and she came down into the water and hung on the rim breathing. And after a while, still facing the wall, she said, "How long?" Levi knew exactly what she was asking. 11th of July, he said. 5:20 in the morning. 94.2. Wake off lane 2. Marit put her forehead against the cold metal. 241 days, she said. 242. She laughed, and then she cried. And Tilly Bach got out of the tank and went and stood at the far end of the greenhouse with her back turned and inspected some empty benches with tremendous interest for 4 minutes. They planted the packet that afternoon. Bo Yeager pulled a flat and mixed the medium himself and would not let anybody else do it. Winnie was allowed out of school early, which Levi had never once done before and did without a second's hesitation. Marit opened the envelope at the bench her father had built at chair height in 1994, which was still in that greenhouse because Bo Yeager had never taken it out. There were 19 seeds in it. They were brown and dry and 26 years old and looked, Winnie said, like absolutely nothing. "How long till we know?" she asked. 4 weeks to know if they come up, Marit said. 7 to 10 years to know if it was worth anything. Winnie Hartigan thought about that. "Okay," she said, and picked up the first one. 11 of the 19 came up. The Bluffside Therapy Pool closed on the 31st of January and did not reopen. 41 outpatients lost the only warm water within 50 miles. And for about 6 weeks that was simply that, the way it usually is. Then a man with multiple sclerosis from Houston County, who had driven in twice a week for 9 years, heard from a nurse who had heard from Tilly Bach that there was a stock tank in a greenhouse out on Prairie Island Road. He asked if he could come. Marit Halvorsen said yes, and then she said yes 11 more times. And by June there were 4 tanks in the north half of that greenhouse, and a proper transfer bench, and a used lift that Bo Yeager found at an auction in Rushford for $900, and Tilly Bach had quit the health system and was running it 3 mornings a week with a schedule taped to the glass. They never gave it a name. People called it the greenhouse. It is still called the greenhouse. The long row went out in the January catalog and came back the following autumn in 1,100 padded envelopes from 38 states. Full of seed, most of it good, some of it terrible, one package containing a note from a woman in Michigan that said, "Only I am 91 and I got the beans to come." The company's margin did not improve for 3 years. Then it did. Soren Halvorsen stayed. That surprised people who had read about it in the paper and surprised nobody who was actually in that courtroom. He and Marit did not repair it quickly, and they did not repair it neatly, and there was a stretch of about 8 months where they communicated mostly through Bo, and Bo hated it and said so daily. It got better in the 4th year. mostly because of an 8-year-old who became a 12-year-old who did not have any interest at all in the concept of two adults not speaking at a table she was also sitting at. Levi Hartigan went back to bread. Hartigan's reopened on 3rd Street in the 2nd year, in a smaller space, 4 days a week, with 2 ovens that had spent 4 years in a storage unit at $41 a month. It is not a large business, and it will never be one. He is there at 1 in the morning, and he is home by 2 in the afternoon, and on Wednesdays he does not open at all. And everybody in Winona knows why, and nobody says anything about it. He and Marit married in the 5th year, in the greenhouse, in March, which is a stupid month for a wedding in Minnesota, and was the only month either of them considered. And this was not a rescue. That has to be said plainly, because the version that gets told around here has gotten smoother every year, and smooth is the enemy of true. A man who cleaned a swimming pool did not heal a woman's spinal cord. He has never once claimed it, and he gets visibly uncomfortable when anyone else does. What actually happened is smaller and stranger and available to almost anybody. For 8 months he wrote down what he saw and did not tell her, because telling her would have handed her a job she had not asked for. And for 14 months he sat 11 feet away with his hands on his knees and did not fill the silence. That is all. That is the entire contribution. People confuse it with hope, and it isn't. Hope is a bet on an outcome, and hope is exhausting to be around, and everybody who ever hoped at Marit Halvorsen was, in the end, asking her for something, asking her to be encouraging news, asking her to make their fear easier to hold. 11 doctors were honest with her, and 1 brother was terrified for her, and 104 people helped her. And every single one of them, in their own way, needed her to resolve. Waiting doesn't need you to resolve. Waiting is just the decision to still be in the room on a day when nothing happens, and then to make it again the next day, and then 400 more times, without keeping score and without being owed anything for it. It is not brave, and it does not feel like anything from the inside. Mostly it feels like being slightly in the way. But it is the rarest thing there is, and if you have ever had one person who did not leave the room when the arithmetic went bad, who did not tell you to stay positive, who just kept turning up at 5 in the morning with a mop, then you already know that everything else people offer you is a substitute for it. There is an apple tree behind a greenhouse on Prairie Island Road in Winona, Minnesota. It is one of 11 that came up out of a paper envelope, and the only one of the 11 that ever produced anything worth eating. And it first fruited in its 9th year, which is late. The apples are green with a red blush, and they are not beautiful. They keep until March in a cold room, which is rare, and they are extremely good, which is rarer. The variety is not registered anywhere, and probably never will be. Around the seed house they call it what the envelope said. Every autumn somebody stands under it with a ladder, and somebody else stands at the bottom holding the basket, and neither of them says much. They're the last apples off the whole property. You have to leave them on longer than you think.